The other week, I was at a small group, and we were introducing ourselves. People were talking about their journeys that they were on, and a guy in the group started like this. He said, "I feel like a snake." And I thought, for the first time in my life, I was like, wow, a guy admits it. But then he carried on, and he explained that this process that he was on, this spiritual journey that he was on, he said it like this. He said, "I keep shedding. It's like my skin doesn't fit me anymore." And after the meeting, it was going over and over and over in my mind. I feel like a snake because I keep shedding, because my skin, what I know, doesn't fit me anymore. And I was thinking, that's really cool. Because what he's describing actually is like a born-again experience. And I went back to John's Gospel, John chapter 3, where Jesus is speaking to Nicodemus. And you must be born again. I mean, if there is sort of a phrase that kind of captures like American Christianity, you must be born again. I mean, even if all you do is go to football, you're going to see someone with a cardboard sign and a black marker, right, that said, "You must be born again." And even when people ask you, "What kind of Christian are you? Are you a born-again Christian?" We have this this is what it means to follow Jesus. And when I looked back at John chapter 3, I was so interested because Nicodemus, of course, is not a sinner. He's a religious leader. And he meets with Jesus at night, and they have this conversation. In the conversation, Nicodemus is saying, "What is going on with you? How are you doing this? Like, what's happening? Like, I don't understand. How is this even happening?" And Jesus said to Nicodemus, "I'll tell you how it's happening. You've got to be born again. You've got to be born again." But he didn't even just say, "You must be born again," in the singular, which is how we use it all the time. When we ask somebody, like, "When were you born again?" they go back to, like, 1969, in the moment that they had that first encounter with Jesus. But when Jesus uses it with Nicodemus, it actually it's in the present tense. It means you must be born again and again and again. And again, and actually, if you start thinking about it, you start following the disciples, you start asking yourself, when exactly were the disciples born again? Or if you were to ask one of the disciples, let's just pick Peter, because he's easy to pick on. We'll just say, "Peter, when were you born again?" And Peter could be like, "Well, there was that time at the Transfiguration. That was pretty, enlightening. That was like Jesus, I had no idea he's the Christ. And then there was that time. And then there was a time when I was fishing, and Jesus called me out from the shore, and I started following him in ministry. And then there was that time after I denied him, and Jesus showed up again and said, 'Do you love me? Feed my..." And then there was that time when Jesus died. And then there was the time when he, rose from the dead. And then there was a time where he, ascended to heaven and said, "Over to you." And then there was a time, that really awkward time, when Jesus breathed on us. That was weird. And then there was fire from heaven. There was a time we were in the upper room, and then there was fire from heaven. I was preaching to 3,000 people in a different language. Then there was that time. I mean, which time? Which born-again experience would you like? And this is sort of one of the most liberating and exciting things and processes in my own life right now, that there is this experience, this invitation that Jesus gives to his followers, and particularly to religious leaders who come during the night hours to ask Jesus how exactly this works. And Jesus has this great word for us. He says, you must be born again.